In this video, I'm going to explain some of the arguments against aim training, and then explain why I disagree or why I agree. For anyone who's new to the channel, I have a lot of hours in Kovaaks and play a lot of Kovaaks, so I'm definitely biased towards aim training. The first argument I've heard is this idea of center of mass aiming. Basically, what this argument means is that people who play aim trainers and spend their time aiming at the center of the target, when they go in game will have a hard time hitting a smaller section of the target, particularly the head. What I say to this is that a smaller section of a target is just your target. All you have to do is treat the head as it's your target and you'll aim for the head. Most aim trainer targets are smaller than heads, so you don't really need to start struggling because the head's small or something. I've also heard word for word that it's like using a beach ball to try and hit a mosquito. People who make this argument have probably just played default aim lab tasks and don't realize that there's a lot more to aim training than just what aim lab immediately pushes in your face. Now, before I get into some more arguments, I gotta ask you to subscribe. It helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it. And also it lets you see more content like this. Now, there's also this argument that if you're not moving while shooting, but you are moving while shooting in game, you're not going to be benefiting your aim very much. This even applies to Valorant and CS with counter-strafing. Now, this argument comes from two places. The first is that it's hard to use both your hands at once when you're used to just using one hand, and the second is that it's hard to read targets while you're moving. Both of these arguments are completely legitimate, but there's two problems. The first is that you can actually train these things in aim trainers, and most people do. You don't get like the game-specific movement skills you'd acquire from playing games while you're playing aim trainers, otherwise I wouldn't get hate mail for moving like a bot, but you're supposed to practice these things in game. I'm not against in-game practice for some things. You can still get the benefit of incorporating left-hand motor movements in aim trainers, which trains aiming with the distraction of left-hand movements as well as target reading while moving, and then just play games more than I do to learn proper movement mechanics. As for scenarios where you're not moving and you're not practicing either of these things, you're still improving your aim, just not working on the skill of using your aim while also moving and using your left hand. Does this mean when you start moving that this practice won't apply? No. As someone with about 2 hours of Overwatch trying to aim while moving, I can say the skills I trained in Kovaaks while standing still definitely transferred. So why would you ever train your aim without moving, right? Seems less beneficial. Well, depending on your game, you may want to favor movement-based scenarios. That'd be completely legitimate. However, a lot of times it's also better to just isolate your right hand movements and focus on your right hand to improve it faster. Another common complaint is that you don't get any game sense in aim trainers. Play the game and learn game sense and aim at the same time. I hear this a ton. What I say to these people is that you don't learn aim by watching Pro League, but you learn game sense. Most people in most games agree that watching pros and good players is a very good way to learn to play and improve your game sense because it's more efficient than the game itself for learning game sense. Aim trainers work the same way. They allow you to isolate a specific skill you're working on, which would be your aim, and improve it as fast as possible. Now, I also hear people saying that if you start playing aim trainers way more than you play the game, and don't practice the game you're actually playing, you end up kind of unbalanced, it's pretty bad, and you don't have these skills. I'm not saying don't play the game, I'm just saying aim trainers are a helpful add-on for improving the game, and if you enjoy playing them and want to play them as much as I do, that's fine too, but that's not the most effective way to improve. Effective improvement is just using aim trainers in moderation. Now, it's really hard to say what moderation actually is, but if you're spending more time in aim trainers than the actual game, that's not the most effective way to improve. Even a 1:5 ratio is probably a lot. Now, there's also this argument that aim trainer balls aren't shooting back. You don't learn to aim under pressure. Aiming under pressure really has two components, the adrenaline and the time it takes to shoot the ball. Part of this argument really only applies to flicks, and that's the idea that you can aim as slowly as you want and just be as accurate as possible, which it doesn't apply to a game. Most current aim training routines for games that rely on your ability to flick to targets either have scenarios or instructions that emphasize or require flicking fast. If you're aiming too slowly, that's either a small part of a larger routine with a specific purpose, or you're training wrong. As for the idea that you don't get the same adrenaline rush you'd get when you're in like your World Esports Championship or your Bronze 1 rank up game, well, that's just adrenaline. It's the same hormone for really most of stress. You definitely do need to practice this and aiming with this, but trying to force yourself to always practice aim while stressed is inefficient because it's a lot harder to focus on actually learning and aiming when you're stressed. As a side note, a cool way to practice staying calm while shooting on top of playing the game is just to take cold showers. The rush of adrenaline and forcing yourself to remain calm is actually pretty much the same thing as trying to stay calm when you're stressed from aiming, even though they're so different of scenarios. Now that I've explained why these drawbacks aren't actually that bad, why would you aim train? Aim training presents you with way more targets, way more frequent targets, way less downtime, and harder challenges. Also, if you're not very good, there's easier challenges. If you're intermediate, there's just challenges at the right level for you to feel challenged. People might say, well, if you're not winning in game, then you're challenged enough, but that's not true. Just because someone's better at shooting the big target that you are than you are at shooting them doesn't mean that you wouldn't improve faster if you tried playing against the smaller target or something more challenging. On top of the challenge, aim training is just more repetitions, faster aim progress. Again, don't train all the time. Games aren't only aim, but if you want to improve the aim aspect of whatever game it is you play, aim train. Thanks for watching and subscribe for some tips on how to do this aim training.